before the Bal Shem Tov's passing, he gathered his students and he gave each one of them different jobs. And there was one Talmud, one disciple of the Bal Shem Tov, he gave him the job that after my passing, you should go around and you should tell Bal Shem Tov stories. That's what you should do. Just go around and tell Bal Shem Tov stories. Any story. It doesn't have to be a story that you were there for, although he was there. This disciple, Rabbi Yankiv, was his name, but Rabbi Yankiv was personally present for many Bal Shem Tov stories as a student of the Bal Shem Tov, but also he knew many, many stories. In fact, he was the world expert on Bal Shem Tov stories. So this was his job. And he used to travel around telling these stories. He'd come to a town and he would charge whatever he would charge. They'd pay him a ruble to tell stories for a day, and then he would travel to the next town, and this is before they didn't have the internet, so people were bored, so he'd pay a guy to tell stories. So he was traveling like this for years, and it was kind of getting tiring. He was kind of getting bored of traveling around telling Bal Shem Tov stories. He wanted to settle down, but really, this was how he made a living at this point, so he couldn't really stop. And then he heard the craziest thing. He heard that there was a wealthy Jew who would pay an exorbitant fee for each and every Bal Shem Tov story that he was told. Like, people had gone there and made out like bandits. They would go there and tell 10 stories, and he'd give them a big gold coin for each story. So he said, if that's the case, I'm the world's expert in Bal Shem Tov stories. I have an encyclopedic knowledge of all the Bal Shem Tov stories. I'll go to this guy, I'll tell him thousands of stories, make thousands of gold coins, and I'll retire. So Rabbi Yankiv goes to this, he finds out where this wealthy Jew lives. He lives on some estate somewhere, and he finds where he lives, and he travels. Takes him a while to get there. And he presents himself and he says, my job is telling Bal Shem Tov stories. I think I'm your guy. And this wealthy Jew is the lord of the manor, says, perfect, excellent. You're going to be my Shabbos guest, and tonight at the meal, we're going to honor you to tell a Bal Shem Tov story. I'm very excited that you're here. Okay, so they set him up at the head of the table, and the balabos, the owner of this estate, gets up and says, we want to welcome Rabbi Yankiv, who was one of the students of the Bal Shem Tov and the world's foremost expert in Bal Shem Tov stories. And Rabbi Yankiv, tell us a story. And everybody looks at Rabbi Yankiv, and he freezes. He can't say a word. And then he looks at the host and he says, I can't remember a story. I'm sorry, I can't remember a story. And the host is very gracious about it. He says, Yankiv is tired from his travels. Tomorrow at the meal, he'll tell us about Shem Tov story. And then he smoothed it over like, nothing awkward just happened. Next day, at the day meal, the host says, Rabbi Yankiv is here, and now he's going to grace us with a Bal Shem Tov story. Go ahead. Yankiv gets up. I'm sorry, I can't remember a single story. It's not a problem, Rabbi Yankiv. You're still tired. You'll rest. You'll tell a story at Shalosh Shudas. They tried then, same thing happens. Malava Malka, same thing happens. Sunday brunch, same thing happens. Goes on like this until Tuesday. Every opportunity Rabbi Yankiv has to tell a Bal Shem Tov story, he freezes. He cannot even remember the beginning of a single story. So eventually, humiliated, he goes to the host and he says, I don't know what's going on, but it's not happening. And the host says, I understand. I don't fault you. It's fine. I'm going to arrange a carriage to take you to the city. They lived out, in the countryside in this big manor. So my coach will take you to the city, and from there you'll be able to arrange transportation. So Rabbi Yankiv gets in the coach, and the horse starts galloping. And they're riding away, and he looks in the back in the distance, and he sees that the this manor where he had just spent the past 4 or 5 days is getting smaller and smaller behind him as they travel down the road. And he sees the Jew, the wealthy Jew who's the host, is standing there sort of watching him off, and he's getting smaller and smaller in the distance. And they go over the ridge, like they dip down, where now, if you look back, you can't see the manor anymore because it's behind the horizon. So now they've disappeared out of the sight line. And all of a sudden, Rabbi Yankov yells at the driver. He says, turn around, go back, as fast as the horses will take us. Go back now. I remember the story. They turn around, come back to the manor. He jumps out, he runs inside, he finds the wealthy Jew, the lord of the manor. He says, I remembered how one begins. Let me start, or I might forget it too. Okay, go ahead. He says, okay, I'm just going to start. I don't even remember the ending, but I got to start. I'm going to start. He says, yes, start. Go ahead, start. He says, okay, the story was, it was Motzei Shabbos. It was right after Shabbos, and this happened a lot of times. I was there. It was one of the stories of the Baal Shem Tov where I was there. It happened to me. It was after Shabbos. The Baal Shem Tov said to me, let's go, Rabbi Yankov, let's go. And I got on the coach, and we did this many times. And we got on the coach, and we had kfitzas haderech. We had a miraculous shortening of the way, and we would go crazy long distances in short amounts of time, so I have no idea how far we went, how many lands we traveled across. And it was dark, it was night, it was Motzei Shabbos, and I just know that the horses were flying and we were going fast. And it was Sunday morning when we arrived at this strange land. I don't know what country it was. It was a foreign country. I didn't recognize the people and the dress and the style of the buildings. I knew it was a foreign country. And we were in the Jewish quarter, and I saw there was a scaffolding and a stage, and I wasn't sure what this is, but I looked around and there was no one in the street. It was like a ghost town, and the Bal Shem Tov led me to a particular house. We knocked on the door and nobody answered. There was a mezuzah. It was a Jewish house. We knocked on the door, and nobody answered. And then finally the Bal Shem Tov says, I order you to open up. This is Yisrael Bal Shem Tov. And a woman from behind the door said, I can't open the door. Don't you know that the bishop is out there right now, and he's going to build a fire, and he's going to burn a Jew at the stake. It's Easter Sunday. This is his cruel custom that he does every year. I dare not open the door. The Bal Shem Tov says, open the door right now. And she opened it, and they came inside, and she closed it and locked it right behind them. And Rabbi Yankov says, so we were inside the house, and the Bal Shem Tov then said to me, Rabbi Yankov, I want you to go to the platform, and I want you to tell the bishop that Yisrael Bal Shem Tov is here, and that I would like to speak with him. So I opened the door, and the woman started screaming, don't open the door, don't open the door. I was able to get out. She locked it behind me, and I understood it was very dangerous. I also understood the Bal Shem Tov had given me orders, so you just do as you're told. And I walked up to the platform, and I saw there was this bishop there. I saw him, and he was directing people, workers, and he was getting this pyre ready. And I'd been told what he was doing. I understood his fiendish plot. And I said to him, Yisrael Bal Shem Tov is here and would like to see you now. And Rabbi Yankov was telling the story, and he's saying, and so I remember the bishop said to me, tell the rabbi I will be there in half an hour. And I walked back, and again, the woman didn't want to answer the door, and then she opened the door, and I squeezed my way in, and then I said to the Bal Shem Tov, the bishop says he'll see you in a half an hour. And the Bal Shem Tov said, no, tell him he'll see me now. So again, we had to open the door, and the woman was frightened, and I walked across the street, and I walked up to the platform, and I said to the bishop, no, the Bal Shem Tov will see you now. And miraculously, no harm came to me. The bishop got down off the platform, and he walked with me to the house. Of course, this time when the door opened, the woman fainted, seeing the bishop there. And the bishop looked at the Bal Shem Tov. Rabbi Yankiv was telling the story to this wealthy Jew. He says, the bishop looks at the Bal Shem Tov. The Bal Shem Tov says to the bishop, I want to speak to you in the other room. There was another room, a side room, like a storage room, and they went in there privately. And they were there for a long time. Could have been hours. I don't remember what happened after that. I don't remember if he came out. I don't remember if I saw the bishop again. I don't remember us traveling back. I'm sorry, I don't remember the end of the story. And so this wealthy Jew, the lord of the manor, says to Rabbi Yankiv, you really don't recognize me. Rabbi Yankiv says, I'm sorry, I don't. The host says, I was the bishop. He says, you're Jewish. He says, let me tell you the rest of the story you don't know. I grew up a regular Jewish boy, went to Cheder, and maybe I was a little bit too smart for my own good. I was very talented, and I always felt kind of special. And I didn't think people appreciated my talents. And I got a resentment. And I carried a chip on my shoulder. And then one day, the church was trying to win Jewish souls, and I started talking to this priest, and he flattered me and told me how smart I was, and I felt very good that somebody recognized how smart I was. And I saw this as an opportunity to finally be recognized. And what do you know? I climbed the ranks, and I went from priest to Monsignor to bishop. He says, but of course they all knew about my past. So to prove that I was one of them, what did I have to do? I had to become the most virulent anti-Semite. And I developed this custom, this practice of publicly torturing a Jew every Easter, burning him alive at the stake. And I did this for years. And I knew it was wrong. But I was stuck. I couldn't get out of it. And I rationalized it. I had all types of arguments, how I could live with myself. And after years of this, one night I had a dream. It was the night before I was supposed to do this terrible thing again. And I woke up, and I remembered my dream, that I saw my soul being judged in the heavenly court, and that the angel who was presiding said that there is no redemption for this soul who has caused so much anguish and destruction, that took so many innocent lives. There's no redemption for this. And I saw the souls of my ancestors looking very dour, and they had nothing they could say to defend me. They looked ashamed. And then all of a sudden, I saw this holy rabbi, and he said, I, Yisrael Bal Shem Tov, will take responsibility for this soul's rectification. He says, I woke up, and I knew it was more than a dream. I knew that I would meet this Rabbi Yisrael Bal Shem Tov very soon, and that whatever he would do, I would have to listen, because he was going to help me somehow redeem my past. So I got up in the morning, and what can I do? I mean, they had already built the platform in the middle of the Jewish quarter, and I went there, and I started building the pyre and instructing the workers how to get everything ready for this terrible display. And then I saw you, Rabbi Yankiv, I saw you. And you said, Yisrael Bal Shem Tov is here, he wants to see you now. And I knew it was true because that was my dream. I told you wait a half an hour because I needed to just finish the job one last time. And then you came back and you told me no. The Baal Shem Tov says now. And I realized that there would be no last time. That this was it. And that I had to follow you. And I followed you into that house. And that woman fainted, and we went into that small storage room. And the Baal Shem Tov spoke to me for hours. And he told me the bottom line was that I could redeem myself. I would have to secretly sell all of my possessions, liquidate all of my assets, with a third of my treasures anonymously donated to the Jewish community that I had caused so much destruction in. The other third, I should bribe the church to look the other way while I escape in the middle of the night. And the other third I should keep and use that third to rebuild my wealth and to have a life, which I did. And you see, I'm wealthy. And I asked the Baal Shem Tov, if I do all of this, how will I know that my teshuvah is really accepted? How will I know that it worked? How will I know that the process is finished, that it's culminated, that I can rest? And the Baal Shem Tov told me, very simple. When you hear your own story told by somebody else, you'll know that your process of return has finished and that everything has been cleaned and healed. So he says, what do you think I did? I paid people for every Baal Shem Tov story. Because every Baal Shem Tov story I heard, I was hopeful that would be the time I would hear my story. Baal Shem Tov said, when I hear my story told by somebody else, that will be my healing. And every time they would come in, they would tell a different Baal Shem Tov story. And heartbroken, I would pay them, but with humility, I accepted the fact, apparently it's not time yet. Apparently it's not time. And so with hope, I would wait for the next person to come with new Baal Shem Tov stories, and it was never the time. And when you showed up, Rabbi Yankov, I recognized you immediately, and I knew this was it because you were there. You didn't just know that story, you lived that story. And I was ready. This was it. And then Friday night, when you couldn't remember a single story, I understood what was happening. It wasn't time yet. And I accepted that. I really accepted that. And Shabbos day, and Shabbos afternoon, and Motzei Shabbos, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, I accepted that. And when I saw you go over that hill, and your coach disappeared out of sight, I put myself in Hashem's hands. And I said, Hashem, as you will. As you will. I understood there would never come a chance again that the one person in the world who knew this story was going to appear. Again, I surrendered. I said, Hashem, as you will. And at that moment of surrender, I saw the coach turn around and come back over the hill, and you ran to me. And the minute you started blurting out that story, I knew which story it was. That was my story. And I want to thank you because now I know that I've healed. It's a long story. But I told you this story for a reason. We live in shame and secrecy, in isolation, feeling separate, feeling that nobody could know our true story. We can't afford to allow them to even guess about our true story. And I don't want to hear you say, well, there's nothing shameful about mental illness. If you're struggling with depression and anxiety, it's just a diagnosis. Okay, I just want to say something. I hope you'll forgive me. But, okay, sure, you're right. You're right. There is no moral stigma. Truly, there's no moral stigma having depression any more than having cancer. That's true. But let's be honest. When somebody has depression and anxiety, there are a lot of things they end up not being able to do that they carry a lot of guilt for. Let's not sugarcoat this. So it's not just the shame that I can't tell people my diagnosis. It's the shame, did they know how I fell short as a mother, as a husband, as a coworker, as a neighbor, as a Jew? So there's a lot of moral guilt. Don't pretend there isn't. A lot of things that we do when we're in pain to try to get relief, or things that we don't do when we're completely exhausted and we just don't have energy to do anything. So there is a lot of moral guilt. And so we live in the shame and the isolation of that secrecy. I can't tell people how poorly I've been functioning. I can't tell them the full extent of it. I can't tell them. And then one day, you decide it's not a choice anymore. I don't have the luxury to keep this a secret anymore. I've got to tell somebody. And if you're fortunate, you find the right people, trustworthy people, empathetic people, non-judgmental people, and you tell them your story and you don't die of shame and embarrassment. But when does the full healing occur? When you hear your story told by somebody else. Maybe the details are slightly different. Maybe the exact dates and times are changed. But the things that you thought were uniquely disgusting and unmentionable about your story, you hear somebody else who you love and respect saying the same exact thing happened to me. And another person, and another person, and another person. Happened to me. Happened to me. That also happened to me. We heal when we hear our story told by somebody else. Hey, this is Shais Taub. You were just watching a clip from this class. If you want to get the full context, the full class that this clip that you just watched was from, you watch right here. Click right here. Here.